Amazon has done. And this also led to a new arms race with the Chinese participants coming in. And where I think India has done very well is that India has tried to find this ways around things. What we call in Hindi jugaad is very, we are very good at that aspects in the innovation ecosystem. And now that we see that it's not that huge price that is required for building an LLM and Indian language models, and they see a very options available from the Chinese innovation coming in, the lot of focus has come to India. And what we also see is that Sam Altman, who visited a year back when OpenAI has just started, and he came and he told that it's really a hopeless idea for India to even think about building its own LLM, just came a couple of weeks back before the summit and talks that India is one of the major players to look into the LLM market and to give leadership to the world. Why this is so important is that when you have the US big tech ecosystem, which is mostly private industry backed, and you have a very government backed ecosystem in China, which is also aspects of geopolitics that comes in. And that is where I think understanding of the public policy and how these countries operate becomes very, very important before you go and understand what a country will do. And then in those contexts, what should the rest of the world do? Like say there is European Union, where there is already some amount of regulations on AI. So given that there are already some regulations on AI, it might be that they might be slow on the innovation part, because you are trying to stop or out of the innovation from happening by regulating stuff. And there is no harm in doing that, and there is no right way of doing either of these things. And that is where I think we have to look into AI as a technology and see how we should operate AI. I was just talking to Kuhu and Parth before the session started, and there are technologies which has developed over the last few 100 years, and we have seen not only 100 years, maybe thousands of years, and we have seen how they have transformed mankind. One of the biggest example is of fire. So fire is one such technology which was there, and before fire was there, people used to eat things raw. So I think that was maybe thousands of years back. Now that you have fire, you can eat cooked food, but fire can also burn houses. It can cause a lot of challenge to mankind. So how do you see this as a technology? Then you have things like knife. Again, something that can help in operating a patient in a healthcare setting. It can be used in a kitchen setting to make nice meal for you. And again, it can be used as a weapon in various sorts. And then something that we talk about a lot, and something which has become very important after World War I and World War II, nuclear technology. Nuclear technology on one end has a devastating effect, as we saw in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and it also is a way for providing clean energy. So there are examples of this nature which shows that technology can have a very nice side and technology can have a very fearsome side also. And now comes the aspects that is the topic of this webinar. Where do we peg AI to be in? Do we peg AI to be a good technology or a technology that we fear of to start with? This discussion is even more important because just today, the AI Action Summit ended in Paris. And this was co-chaired by President Macron from France and PM Narendra Modi from India. And this was the first time that our Prime Minister addressed the world on the issue of AI particularly. When the G20 took place a couple of years back, then India took a leadership position on DPI, and I saw that Sridhar and Shatarju, you are also work on that area. It's very interesting to see that. And India has actually innovated quite a lot in this last uh, 10 last 1 or 2 decades, and the innovations has come in terms of Aadhaar, like a digital thing. Then it has come in terms of UPI. So it is showing the world that you can innovate on your own, and we are looking at a structure which is called as the DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure. We can go into some of these aspects as we go further. And in the declaration for G20 way back in 2023, and even in the Brazil summit in 2024, there was declaration that DPI will be a common thing, because when you're looking at countries beyond, say, US or China, they often don't have that tech muscle power to build their own stuff. So they will need help from others to build some of those technologies. And who will provide them? If you rely completely on private players, they will take a lot of their money, which might not be available for this country. So in those situations, what do we do? Can AI also become a DPI, and we serve for the world? And the World Summit that ended had 3 areas that we talked about. One is the innovation on AI, the governance, and the regulation. The regulation and the safety, the governance, safety, and then the regulations part. And that is where I think the discussion focuses on, like, how do we look at AI as a technology? And after these opening remarks, I would like to open and invite maybe Sridhar for your opening remarks on what do you think as AI in the tech, as a technology. Does it need regulation? Does it have, do we look at it from a different perspective? Can we look at a software solution? Like I gave examples which were from fire to nuclear to knife. How do you relate to it? Because based on that, it will depend what sort of regulations we look into for AI.
Absolutely. Thanks, Abhik, for setting up the context and getting us started on this topic. And a lot of the ideas and analogies you used are very helpful for us to think about how broadly AI might impact us. And I think one additional layer that I'd like to add to it is the thinking about databases, or relational databases. It's helped me, you know, work through the AI hype cycle as it goes through its phases. So for databases in the early 70s, the initial use was by the US military and the government, and IBM was one of the early providers. And then relational databases became a thing. And in the 80s and 90s, banks started using them because transactions started growing, and general electronic commerce started growing. Credit cards and payment systems began to proliferate. And then the last 25 years, of course, we've seen how e-commerce and pretty much every business has taken to the internet to need to process large inventories, transactions, and social media. So at the center of all of these businesses, all of these technological offerings, we have the relational database that is the humble cog that is available almost everywhere. And in these 50-60 year evolution of databases, all the topics that we're discussing now about AI has also played through. The question of openness, are we talking about open source, are we talking about open, how safe are proprietary offerings, the question of competition that you brought up, is it about a few key players who dominate the market versus being able to have healthy competition? The commoditization aspect of it. So most of us don't think about databases as a technology or a software solution that's present everywhere. But we know that every app in every phone and every smart device and computer around the world technically has and runs multiple databases. So that's the analogy that I tend to go for, because AI is now, although it's been around for just as long, in the age of high speed internet and cloud computing, we're seeing it play out globally in a very fast paced and collaborative manner. So I think the takeaway for me from this is that we don't regulate databases as technologies, but we look at very specific sectors and applications to see what's worth regulating. So if it's in the healthcare sector, electronic health records are stored in databases, which means we think about what's the privacy and safety aspect there for patients. And whereas it's not as hard and fast in, say, other sectors like maybe social media and what they use, how they use databases. So I think that's one model that I've been playing around with, and it's helped think through this a bit better.
No, no, I think that's very interesting to hear that, Sridhar, that you look at it as a general use technology, and based on the domain of application, we try to regulate it not as a technology. But we also see that in the European Union and EU, they have come up with an EU AI Act where they are trying as a central body to regulate AI. Now we don't know whether that's right or wrong at this point, because I think we are too early in the process to come out with a verdict on that. But I think let's hear from to on what your views are on AI and regulations of AI.
Thank you so much, Avik, for that opening remarks, which sets the context, and also to Sridhar, who's taken the conversation forward and highlighted how databases and specific sectors should be focused at. I'll just take a like 2 to 3 minutes to build on top of your opening remarks, if I may. I was taking notes following your very useful remarks. You mentioned how India has been good with DPI, and India has this approach of quote unquote jugaad to get things done. So I think it's important here for the audience to understand that the AI stack comprises of primarily three layers. One is the data sets layer, and you train these data sets using the second layer, which is the compute power, uh, to train the large language models. So compute power, like you need compute to power the training of large language models with the data sets. So we need to look at India's AI infrastructure setup into these through these three lenses. One is data sets, second is compute, third is large language models. In terms of data sets, it's pretty well known that India has a very vast ecosystem of data sets. The only problem for AI is that it's most likely not in a form digestible for large language models. And the government of India is trying its best, and it's putting a lot of effort to digitize this data. And India is, I think the MeitY is going to launch the datasets platform as well. So that's datasets. We have a lot of it, but maybe not in the digestible form for large language models. Second is compute. So I think last year when the India AI mission was launched, it was realized that India lacks compute power. So it announced a provisioning of 10,000 graphic processor units. These are, of course, GPUs produced by NVIDIA and the likes. And very recently, until like 10 days back, the government of India announced that it has secured above 18,600 GPUs, which will be given out to the AI ecosystem. So that's compute more or less taken care of. But then we just have the compute. It's not being used at the moment to train a large language model. And third is, of course, the large language models, which you, Avik, alluded to in the beginning, that DeepSeek from China. China has launched DeepSeek, so India should launch its own large language model. So the announcement has been made, but it will still need to come from the industry. So that's pending. So I thought I'll highlight this AI stack to begin with very briefly. Second is we've also alluded to the fact that AI is a general purpose technology like uh, electricity and the internet. However, no comparison is going to be true. Like AI is unlike electricity, although it's a general purpose technology. AI is unlike internet. The only key takeaway here is that we cannot regulate the underlying technology. Like we shouldn't have, like we don't regulate electricity directly, or we don't regulate the internet, but we regulate aspects of it. With AI also, we need to regulate or rather seek accountability for particular use cases. And we should leave it at that because not much more, like it won't help us if we continuously analyze AI with other general purpose technologies, apart from the fact that we shouldn't regulate the underlying technology of AI and just focus on use cases. And the last comment which I had was picking up from your opening remarks is on digital public infrastructure. Yes, India has done great on digital public infrastructure, but it's at the end of the day, it's an infrastructure on top of which public sector and the private sector can build. In the payment space, we've seen how critical it is for the private sector to participate. We know the success case of Phone Pay or Google Pay. So the key takeaway here is that India should look to scale AI like DPI has scaled public services. That's one. And sorry, just taking notes. And then also India has an approach to democratize tech, which it has done with DPI. But beyond these two things, making it cheap, accessible, and democratizing AI, there's no strong coherent link. Of course, there's the attitude of the Indian ecosystem to do well with technology. We have succeeded with DPI, but there's only so much to gain when you compare DPI and AI. Now, if I may, if I could now jump onto the topic of this webinar, which is regulation of AI. I think I'll just outline. I wrote a working paper last year. I'll just outline the findings of that working paper, following multiple interviews with government, academia, and industry. First is that we don't need an existing law, and we don't need a new novel law. I'm so sorry. We need to apply existing laws, but we don't need a new novel law. And you alluded to the EU AI Act. It will of course be implemented in due course, and the companies are being given time to get adjusted to the obligation. So India does not need a new law because there are huge economic costs attached to it. The European Commission itself has a finding that it will cost the European Union, it will cost the global economy somewhere between 1.6 billion euros to 3.3 billion euros just to comply to the EU AI Act. India can't afford to do that because India is not a developed state. It hasn't leveraged the technology of AI as much as the West has, as much as the AI superpowers of US and China have. So India can't bring in a new AI law. Having said that, we should recognize that there are existing laws which already apply to harms which are either induced by AI or corroborated by AI. So there are existing laws on the IP front, or we have criminal laws, we have the IT Act. So we should apply existing laws, and we should understand what is the gap. Once you apply the existing laws, and if there are AI harms which are still problematic, we should understand the gap, and then we should think if we should bring in a new AI regulation and amendment, so on and so forth. And here I may say there are some laws which only need some clarification or tweaking. For example, deepfakes. Deepfakes can be addressed by the existing provisions of the IT Act, Section 66, 72, so on and so forth. And maybe they just need a clarification or an amendment in the law, or maybe a court applying that provision to deepfakes and then just clarifying how to apply this law. You don't need anything new. Another place where you don't need anything new is job losses. Job losses is often touted as an AI risk, but the solution is a policy one. Reskilling and upskilling initiatives will take care of job losses. And if that doesn't take care of it, laws can't take care of job losses. And thirdly, there may be some new harms which are exacerbated by AI. Let's say on social media. I mean, the exposure to AI-driven content to children is very high. So in spaces like that, there is no clear-cut answers in existing laws. For that, you may bring in new transparency obligations for AI service providers. So that's the bigger bucket of existing laws. That's one part done. Second is there are some prerequisite which any jurisdiction needs to do before bringing in new laws on AI. So for India, we don't accurately understand what are the risks and what are the unique benefits of AI. Broadly, we can say AI helps agriculture in predicting land productivity. Broadly, we can say it helps healthcare, but we need to have a stronger understanding of its benefits so that it helps our economy. And secondly, we need to have a stronger understanding of the AI risks in the local context. How is it that AI harms us in the local context? How is it India harms the Indian healthcare system, the Indian education sector? So once we have a repository of AI harms, then we can build our own AI risk classification frameworks. And here, I would like to bring in a conceptual understanding about risks and harms. Risk is actually the probability of a harm occurring and the evidence of harm itself. So risk is future looking. So EU AI Act has that four risk tiered risk system, but India can't follow that blindly. India needs to understand what are the harms in its local context, and then on top of it, India can build its risk classification framework and probably identify two or three or maybe a dozen high risk use cases and then regulate those. So I think those are 2 points I'll close my remarks on for now. Apply existing laws and try to understand the risks and benefits of AI, and in particular create a repository of AI hubs.
No, that's excellent point. I think that is how the system ideally should be, because as we are in this tech age, new technologies will come at every point in time. And even now, when we talk about emerging technologies, AI is just one of them. We talk about blockchain, we talk about robotics, we talk about AR, VR, and all these are topics that need discussion. Both from the tech side, the tech people will be looking at developing the solutions. But see, policymakers like you or people, when you look into an organization like ISPP, they will look at seeing the impact of this technology on the society. and then based on that, how to frame policies accordingly. That is where I think the technology becomes very crucial for for a policy institution like this. And today we are all majorly driven by technologies. Like, see, if you have kids, or you have young people in your household, you might have seen they are glued to their mobile. Now Australia recently have passed a law that if you are below 16 or 18, I forget exactly the number, you will need the parental consent before registering on a social media platform. I think this is a phenomenal move, because if the parental consent is put in place, then that will ensure the young adults or the teenagers are not able to use the technology, or this, even they are using it, it is monitored. So the laws are existing, but we take use of those existing laws. Then the other thing that comes up is the aspect of deepfake. And let me just pose question on that technology, because if you see, deepfake is something that is feared the most today. We see deep fake videos, and even President Macron, for publicity of the AI Action Summit, he shared his own deep fake video with some music person. I don't follow English band, so I don't know, but some band, and he's also doing music with that person. And this was a deep fake. Now the thing is that similar thing last year was done by in Tamil Nadu, where I think Karunanidhi came and told people to follow civic rules. So that was a good use of thing. Whereas here you see defects can be made. Now I think the users can be there. In the case of Karunanidhi and Tamil Nadu, what we saw was that he is coming and telling people to, I think, follow traffic rules and follow societal rules, which was a good thing. But in some cases, it is used to fool people. So deepfake is a technology. How do we use it? What do you think about? Because I think everyone has spoken about deepfake. Even President Modi has shared, Prime Minister Modi has shared examples on deepfake, and many other people have shared it. So, what is your take on deepfake? What sort of regulations we need for deepfake, given with the emergence of AI, creating deepfakes is become easier and easier. It's at our fingertips today. Maybe over to Shadaktu, and then maybe to Sridhar.
Sure. So again, a really nice question. It's a tough one actually on deepfakes. With deepfakes, it's slightly complicated because I would just highlight that deepfakes is one of the many AI harms. It's not the most important. It's difficult to compare, but there are more AI harms out there. But specifically on deepfakes, it has, for good or for bad, it has gained popularity because of popular individuals being target of deepfakes, celebrities and politicians alike. So that does two things. It highlights deepfakes, and it doesn't highlight other AI harms. The good thing it does is it at least highlights a tough, very difficult AI harm. So in terms of technological solution, you have a technological solution of watermarking. There's a brilliant paper by Brookings Institution which mentions that watermarking to a very large extent deals with deepfakes. But there are some actors who will actually get away with deepfakes even with the solution of watermarking. So I think first and foremost, the Indian government and private sector should actually use watermarking to the largest extent possible. It is not being used to the largest extent possible. Watermarking is just a manner of highlighting whether a particular content is made by AI or not. So let's first do that. Let's first use watermarking technology to the highest degree possible, so that we bring it to a level where we understand this is the amount or the type of defects we actually can't deal with. So once you identify that quantum, that this is which can't be dealt with the existing technologies, then maybe we need to increase awareness amongst consumers, and maybe we need to have here actually regulation will come in. Here maybe you need to increase transparency obligation for large language model providers who actually enable the creation of deepfake. So that's the thought I have, but I really think like 80 to 90% of the problem will be solved if you actually use watermarking technology properly. It is made accessible and usable and low cost. So I think that reduces a lot of the pressure. And then after that, we'll need to rely on awareness and like transparency obligations. So that's my answer on deepfakes.
No, I think
Okay, so I'm just sorry I'm interrupting. So we have a question from the audience. since we discussed about the existing laws that are already there, and we can, always rely on the existing laws to actually combat the harmful effects of AI, to say. So on that, we had something on the deep fake, that how are the existing laws on, say, privacy, defamation, and intellectual property be adopted to combat this misuse of deep fake?
If I can come in there, I think there are provisions in the IT Act and the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, the new IPC. I don't, so I'm a lawyer by profession,
Yeah.
but I'm not practicing anymore, so I don't recall the exact provision. It's in my paper, I can give it to you, but there are three, four provisions in the IT Act and the
Okay.
new IPC, which is the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, which
Okay.
deals with impersonation, or which deals with wrongful content. So the provisions are all there. What's probably lacking is that there is no popular judgment probably by one of the high courts or the Supreme Courts. So these cases need to reach the courts, and there needs to be adjudication on these instances. So I think that would help. Uh, if that doesn't happen, then maybe a clarification by the Ministry of Electronics and IT would help, because right now it's a position maintained by the IT Secretary Shri S. Krishnan that existing laws are enough. So I think it's on them to either clarify, or maybe one of the courts clarifies how it applies. But any lawyer you can refer to, there are provisions to deal with deepfakes. At least if I am a victim of deepfake, I can take that instance, or at least I have a semblance of who did it to me, or if I can file an FIR, and at least the case can proceed on the basis of certain provisions, even if you don't find that person. So there is some redressal mechanism.
Okay. I think Sridhar also wanted to say something about it.
Yes, yes, Sridhar.
Sure. I'm happy to respond to both this and Avik's question as well. In addition to what Shatakatu said, I think there's also what generative AI, especially for audio and video, has done to trust in video communication. So for all you know, I might be a AI generated face speaking on this call, and it's not really easy to tell it apart. And deepfakes are just one manifestation of the misuse that it can enable. And so it fundamentally changes what we use some kinds of communication for, how we trust it. And in addition to watermarking, I know there have been not very successful initiatives to even cryptographically sign a lot of these interactions and enable it to be authenticated that there's a human on the other side, that it's the person that you want to be speaking to or supposed to be speaking to on the human side. I think these are the techniques that will end up uh, having some more value and bringing trust back into the equation, because right now there's really no telling whether something that you're seeing on social media is real or fake, or what does it mean in terms of veracity of information, what are you trusting. So all of these are unsettled right now, and it'll probably take an ecosystem of being of like we've had fact checkers, like we've had verifiable news sources. This is also something that will end up becoming a phenomenon as AI generated content starts to overwhelm human generated content in all these platforms that we know. And I think it's already out there that 80-90% of all text being generated right now in forums, in message boards, and social media platforms is AI slop. So this is inevitably going to become a question of how do you filter it out, and how do you view human generated content versus do you want to see the universe of anything that's being generated out there.
Yeah, very good. Then we have another question.
Yes.
Oh,
I'll,
yes.
yes. So we have a question that says, given limited resources compared to US and others, whether India should invest in building foundation models or focus on application, as Mr. Nandan Nilekani has argued.
Yes. So Sridhar, you would like to take that, and maybe after both of you, then maybe I can also have a go at this.
Yeah. I think I still feel we're very early in this cycle of AI development to think about, whether or not we should invest in a specific technology or architecture. Uh, it's not a question of whether or not we'll be able to do it. The transformer architecture is one architecture that has dominated the last 5-6 years and seen remarkable success. Large language models and investing in uh, say hundreds of millions to train a single model, alongside of course these troves of exabytes of data that are needed to make a model good, is just one version of it. We're seeing experimentation in being able to do this with just CPUs, being able to do this with smaller data sets, being able to do it with much less compute or training periods. So it does not make sense to right now blockade ourselves and say we're not going to explore a certain area. Of course, we need applications. Of course, we need to think about priority areas that are underserved for India generally. So, language based advancements that we can make in terms of enabling anything from conversational payments to healthcare through telemedicine, all of these are aspects that we'll benefit from doing India specific advancements. So whether it's about synthetic data and providing data sets for languages that are low resource digitally and other aspects of it, but uh, it it might not make sense to right now ignore the side of foundation models and either developing alternatives to what is currently being followed by the highly concentrated Silicon Valley ecosystem. And I think DeepSeek, although it's out there in terms of what their training costs mean, whether it's real, and how we should take it in terms of veracity. I think there is a lot of opportunity to explore and pursue our own foundational models and not just restrict ourselves to applications.
Yes, sir. Shatakshi, you would like to go, and then maybe I can
Sure.
also
Uh,
go on to
I
this.
largely agree with Sridhar. I think he's put it very nicely. There's no reason not to do it, especially now. Technically, the Indian government has gone forward with its investment in large language models. It has gone out for a call for proposals maybe 3 4 days back. So it's already happening. But I think it's a brilliant question because I remember where Nandan Nilekani said it for the first time. He said it at our annual summit, Global Tech Summit, and where he mentioned that India should focus on small language models, not invest that big into LLMs and focus on particular use cases, identify the problem we're trying to solve, and we should be focused there. That should be the cornerstone. It shouldn't become a race about who has a better or the bigger large language model. And I think that still holds true. I mean, there is still merit in focusing on low resource, small language models, and especially open source models. Like India should use Llama. India should see if it's safe to use DeepSeek and go forward with it. Small language models, open source models, geared towards specific use cases. That should happen. But parallelly, India should explore building its own LLMs with full force. Given that DeepSeek has happened, I mean, personally, I honestly, I'm one of the researchers. 1 month ago, I would have still mentioned that India should not go forward with this large language model, but right now it's pretty clear it's possible. So at least explore how much is it possible for us. It's not great to sit out because there's something happening behind the scene. It's called export controls and restriction of technology transfer. So we don't know in what shape or form it is going to restrict our development of technology. Right now, if you look at the export control laws of the US, there's something called the AI diffusion rule. It segregates the world into 3 tiers, and India falls into tier two, where under normal circumstances we can procure up to 50,000 GPUs, which is a good number to look at right now. But we don't know what that number looks down the line. So as long as it is possible to procure these AI infrastructure resources, we should take it and we should do it because I think Sridhar has also mentioned it. At the end of the day, you will need localized data sets to address local problems, and we will need to digitize the existing knowledge we have, the data we have to actually solve our problems. It won't always be wise to use an OpenAI ChatGPT model to solve an Indian healthcare problem.
Yeah, no, I think it's very helpful. I'll just add a few points here. See, this queries that I think is coming from the audience, and which is very, very nice. I think they don't have one answer from a person. So they need to be looked into from that perspective and context. And for that perspective and context, you need to have for the first technical angle because the technology is involved, and then the societal concerns and what the law and culture actually gets blended into the societal norms, and that's what we follow. I think those are inherent things, and based on that you take a decision. So something that you do based on LLM, say in US, and what you do in Europe might be very different as compared to say what you are doing in China. So I think understanding those contexts through an academic lens where you use those things, and those are type of things that you get trained into when you get into a public policy school, because you first understand what are the basics of public policy. You didn't understand what are the nuts and bolts to work with when you are developing policies or you are analyzing existing policies. What policy was made at that point in time? Like many of you might just laugh at this point, because today we have highways where cars are moving at the speed of 100 kilometers, 120 kilometers, and that's very, very natural for the national highways. At one point in time in UK, there was a rule that the roads, because at that point the roads were not for cars, it was mostly for humans or horse carriages. So as the car was going, a person was supposed to run in front of it with a flag, clearing the road so that the car could go, the automobile could go. Now, this was done in the early 1900s because that was how the situation was at that time. It was not wrong. Given that we are analyzing this 120 years later, we feel it's stupid. But when you are seeing the situation at that point in time, the world at that point in the society at that point in time, people didn't know. Today, if you take the whole breadth of a road, maybe 10%, 5% on this side and 5% on this side is used by pedestrian. At that time, 120 years back, the whole road was used by pedestrian. So if you think of a rule, you will be looking at rules that were made in that context. So understanding these layers, understanding the society, how it's changed, and then try to bring something forward thinking requires, I think, formal training in policy matters. And this was the type of answers. You saw the answer that was given by Sridhar and Sadhguru were different, but you have to see like what we are trying to do, say in India. One state might do something else, the other state might do something completely different, because each one is different, and the history and the society and the people of those states are very different. So I think public policy training and using a structured format to doing these discussions becomes very, very crucial, yeah, at this point. Kuhu, over to you. And any further audience question that we have?
Yes, so I have just received a question over the WhatsApp from one of the candidates. So the person is saying that Mr. Harari sees AI as a potential threat, and if left unchecked, and urges proactive regulations to ensure it remains a tool that serves humanity rather than controls it. Seeing the current scenario, what is happening around, how does one assess such a claim?
Yes, so let me take a look. Because see, when a new technology comes, when you don't understand it fully, you start to fear it. I think that is what we are trying to do. We don't understand the technology fully, and we don't know how to deal with it. I think that is where that fear is lying into certain things. See, we will balance ourselves, and that is where what we do. When say, you think about, say, 20 years back, not very long back, just 20 years back, we thought that you can become a star only if you reach Mumbai, or you reach Hyderabad, or you reach Chennai, and you I'm not talking about movie star. You have to have very good connect. You need to be one in those million to be. You have to then out of competition you become a star. Today you can become a star at different level. You can be an Amir Khan or Akshay Kumar or Shah Rukh Khan who has a billion following, but you can also have someone who is at a 50 lakh following, and they are creating their own shows and doing this. Then you can also have people who can have 1 lakh following, people at say 2 lakh following. So there are stars at different level. This market has been created because of technology. 20 years back, this technology was not there, the society was not there. So once AI come up, we humans will not sit idle. We will adapt ourselves to the new technology. Like today, we know that the road, we have to walk on the side. We don't just go and start walking in the middle of the road. If you try to walk in the middle of the road today, you will get killed in the next 5 minutes. But we don't do that. We know that if you have to walk, you are not going in a car, you go from the pedestrian walk on the side. So humans are smart, and we have survived thousands of years. So we know our technology, how to adapt ourselves with. And things will evolve. There are many things that we don't know at this point, and we can only fear things
Yeah.
and think about the worst, but I think things will happen.
I agree with you that the fear is there, but since like this is just I'm thinking of right now, since the technology is advancing at a rapid pace, right? There are rapid advancements in technology. So my question is, we need to ensure the same kind of advancement when it comes to AI regulations also. Because in terms of getting used to it, getting evolves, evolving with the technology. Either we are evolving with the technology at same pace, but I think that pace is not there.
Yes, I think see, the technology also needs to develop. See, like the seat belts. Again, I give the automobile example because it becomes easier because it's a technology that we have seen for more than 100 years. And if you see the regulations for wearing seat belts in India only came up in the late 1900s, early 2000s, whereas it came in the US in the 1960s. There was a 40-year gap in such a technology because the penetration in India of car usage was much later. So it's not that even if a technology is developed, the regulations will come at the same time. We have only say 15% broadband penetration. So things might happen at a later point in time in India as compared to many of the other geographies. And regulations will come in, but I think we also have to look into our startups and a tech ecosystem that we need to promote. If we bring in very stringent regulations like the EU, we will be stifling that innovation from happening in India, which will affect our economic growth in the long term.
Can I come in there, sir?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
please.
please.
I'd actually
Uh,
argue that we've
so-
globally, at least, regulation has been overdone compared to the actual technological advancement because,
Okay.
and it's almost a reaction to regulators and the state being left behind in the big tech movement. Whether it was social media, e-commerce, and not being able to figure out now what do you do with an Amazon or a Facebook. And so having so much voice and discussion around risks, harms, and safeguards around AI, when it's not as easy to pinpoint where is it being used right now. So what are the use cases that we're fighting against, and what are we trying? So this is not to underplay the harms or the risks, but there is, early in the cycle, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And this is played, like Abhi said, even in telegraph and electricity. You used to have people not wanting telegraphs because of a certain few reasons. Electricity had anti-electricity campaigns on grounds that it was too dangerous to use, which is a fact. But we learned to use it. We developed the necessary safeguards and pathways of development to effectively utilize it and unlock an entire range of industrial advancement. So uh, I'd say we're actually ahead of the curve, and there's a lot of focus being given right now to regulation and keeping it on the whatever are the desired pathways, to the point where there's so much hype about LLMs achieving artificial general intelligence and all that, when we know that a lot of it is plateaued, that they're not going to be able to achieve what is being said that it could. So it might not even come to the level of what we're expecting it to do. And so, yeah, a bit of balance is needed to make sure we allow a lot of this innovation to happen while we discover the harms and safeguard against them as well.
So I would just like to come and like largely resonate with what Sridhar said. So firstly, like, do we have time to figure out if AGI is coming? We have a lot of time. Jan LeCun, Meta's chief scientist, he said earlier he had estimated that super intelligence is pretty close, but right now his latest estimate is 10 to 15 years, at least 10 to 15 years away. And this is one of the godfathers of AI, Jan LeCun, Joshua Bengio, and Geoffrey Hinton. Geoffrey Hinton, I think, has slightly longer timeline, although he was the first one to highlight that super intelligence may be close by. So this point that it's at least 10, 15, 20 years away is just to highlight that we have time to figure out the problem. Now coming to the problem itself, I think it's a brilliant question because this question is at the core of all policy there is around AI regulation, AI safety. This question sounds very simple or intuitive that AI is going to overtake us, so let's regulate it. So in that statement itself is an assumption that regulation is all it needs to stop anything that is evil. That statement itself is false because between that technology and that regulatory step, there are many steps in between, and some of which Sridhar also alluded to. So if something looks problematic, the first step should be to understand it in and out properly. And now I've told you there's 10, 15, 20 years at the very least in the worst case scenario. if super intelligence comes towards us. So you figure out what this technology is all about. You figure out what the use cases are, as Sridhar pointed. Then you identify what is the good, what is the bad in it. That's why I said for regulation in India, we need to understand what are the risks and benefits in the Indian local context. And once you understand what is the bad in it, in that larger pool of AI use cases, what is bad, then you need to see what is the most non-friction way of addressing that bad part, so to say. And Avik very nicely elaborated how for students it's a broader understanding of public policy is required. So you need to identify tools which are less friction, which will impact innovation the least. So there could be transparency obligations. Transparency obligation primarily means for a technology developer to be honest about how they are developing the technology and what that technology could do, what their product could do. So that's there. And we can just think of instances. If we say that AI is going to take our jobs away, it's not some super intelligent AGI sitting somewhere in UK or US taking our jobs away. It's people like you and me who are replacing our employees because of efficiency demands. That's what we are doing. It's human versus human at the end of the day. And if you read any work or any publication on future of work, the core analysis or the key takeaway is simple. Beat AI, you just need to use AI. You people AI won't replace people. People with better AI skills are going to replace people without AI skills. So we need to get into nuance. We need to understand what the problem is and whether it can be addressed through non-friction ways. And of course, if using AI, somebody harms someone, somebody literally murders someone or causes physical harm or reputational harm, then you do have existing legal provisions as well to address that. So it's a far more nuanced thing. But this question is actually a brilliant one. It's at the center of all AI policy, I would say.
No, completely agree with that, those views. Thanks.
I think there is one more question.
Yes, sure.
So again, it's from, it says that Yuval Harari suggests requiring companies to clearly label AI-generated content so people can distinguish between human-created and machine-generated information. Is this possible?
So yeah, watermarking is one way to do it. I think
Okay.
that's the leading technology for novelty, watermarking. And I just find that Brookings paper, which I would really urge everyone to read, which actually highlights how watermarking is the solution to a very large extent. Of course, some bad actors will get away with it, but what I think the person asking the question can read more about watermarking technology.
Okay. Sridhar, you have to say something on the same topic.
I think it's just a incremental change of how we've been dealing with bots on the internet. Because if you don't have bot protection on your website, on your e-commerce portal, wherever it is, you'll be spammed, and you won't be able to serve your customers. They won't be able to interact with your content. So this just takes it to the next level in terms of saying that uh, we're trying to even more uh, verifiably say that there's a human on the other side of generated content, and it's just a question of, like Shatakta said, what's the friction you're adding there, and what does it do to actual content that gets generated and exchanged between people.
Mr. Sarkar, you saying something?
No, I was not. I think that's an excellent point that was put by Lakshu on this.
Okay. So I think we are. I think Shatakritu and Sridhar has shared few links. I'm sure I'll share it with all the participants. And we are running. I think we are actually running on the clock right now. It's almost 8:30, and it was a great session. Actually, there are certain points those were covered. We discussed them, but I think as Shatakritu also mentioned that sometimes a very simple question is it becomes an integral part of the whole discussion. So I think we discovered a lot. We discussed a lot of points, and it was a really insightful discussion for me as well. So I would like to thank all of you for being a part of the panel. And I would like to thank all the participants here also who attended today's session. Thank you so much. And I just want to reiterate that The admission cycle at ISPP for the postgraduate program in policy, design thinking and management is we are taking applications for the PDM course. So anybody who's interested in public policy, I would request them to visit our website, to visit the institute and know more about us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you. Thanks for your participation.